If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm Kathryn Hansen, and I appreciate you being here today. I hope you'll learn something that will help you overcome binging and move on with your life. I want you to know that the time it takes to overcome this habit is different for each person. But what's really important, and we're going to talk about this today, is that you keep going even if you do have a binge or multiple binges as you work on recovery. Especially if the binge eating pattern is well ingrained for you, it can take practice to begin consistently dismissing urges to binge and gain confidence that you can fully let go of this habit. Coach Julie is on the show to talk about this with me. And before we get started, I want to share that Julie will be doing a free call on Zoom in just a couple of days if you're listening at the time this episode is released. It will be this Saturday, February 24th, from 2 p.m. until 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And on this call, you can ask Julie your questions, you can receive support, and learn all about group coaching and one-on-one coaching. The call is open to anyone, and to join, simply go to the show description and click on the Zoom link at the time of the call this Saturday. And now we'll get into today's discussion. Coach Julie's back on the show today. I'm so glad to have you here, Julie.
It's so nice to be with you, Kathryn.
Yeah, for sure. And we are going to be talking about learning moments, which is a really important topic in binge eating recovery and as you learn to eat in a normal way. So could you go ahead and introduce the topic? I know this is something you talk about in the group and with one-on-one clients a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because, I think that in this world of recovery, we all want to think, oh, I read Brain Over Binge, and then suddenly I'm never going to binge again. And while I wish that for everyone, the truth is it's usually a lot messier than that. It doesn't usually go that way. So, and it certainly did not go that way in my world. And so I think also part of this stems from diet world where you're either on a diet or off a diet, right? So like you're either on the wagon or off the wagon or, all of those phrases that come up. And so what I like to say is that it's all learning moments. You're either winning or you're learning. And when you learn, you win more later. And so I'd really love to parse that out with you today, because I think that it gets in people's way. They have one binge and they think, oh my God, I've blown it. Then that spirals out and they've never blown it, but it can take a lot longer to get back to a place of peace with that mentality.
Yeah. And even the author of Brain Over Binge still binged a couple more times after I learned the methods that helped me and the brain-based concepts that helped me. And I think it's easy for people to forget that. And I did only binge 2 more times. So I realized that for some people, it is more than that, but everyone is so different and so unique. And then also learning to eat normally, that comes with its own set of learning moments, right? We can stop binging, but then feel like we're still eating in ways that aren't working for us. And we need to learn our own formula for food. And there's so much learning involved in that. And it's so important that we do learn without, messing up, quote unquote, and feeling like we've failed. So yeah, I'd love to talk about many, many aspects of learning moments with you.
Fantastic. And yeah, and to your beautiful point about the 2 times that you document in your amazing Brain Over Binge book, one of the things that's very clear in those moments is that you didn't freak out when they happened.
Yeah.
You treated them like they were learning moments. So because of that, you kept moving forward until you were fully recovered.
That's a really great point. I looked at it like, oh, I fell for my lower brain. Like my lower brain thoughts and urges got the best of me. How did they get the best of me? Okay, I see that. I'm going to prevent that from happening again. And I did. And yeah, for sure. I didn't think, oh, this isn't working. I'm never going to recover. I'm back to square one. I did not think that at all.
Exactly. I mean, that's critical. I've said this before, right? We've all mastered the art of the start. It's not, oh, I binged, so now I'm back at 0. I need to empty all the beads out of my urge jar and cross everything off of my calendar. No, it doesn't work that way. It's like you just ate some extra food, what went well, what didn't go well, what will I do differently? And then you keep moving forward. That is the way to really recover. And when we have those learning moments, we usually needed to have them. In fact, every time we needed to have them because there's some key thing that happens during those learning moments that we didn't know before.
Yeah, for sure. And I love how, so in the Brain Over Binge group, I know you have a learning moments section of the forum where people can go through their learning moments and take the lesson away from them. And what you just said, what went well, what didn't go well, what will I do differently is the formula that the group uses and that you use to help people through this. So could you go through that a little bit? Because I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very important, right? So we start with what went well. In fact, I added a first question of like, how does this make so much sense? As in, how does it make so much sense that I just had a learning moment, right? Like looking at the span of the day, what was going on before, what led up to it. How does it make so much sense that this happened? First of all, just to normalize it, right? And then what went well, right? What have you done that was actually in your favor already? And people balk at that. No, nothing. I just want to because we're so good at fixating on the bad, right? We have that negativity bias of the brain. It is always with us and our brain wants to jump there. And so in forcing ourselves to say, how does this make sense? And what went well? We are overriding that negativity bias of the brain, which is actually going to snap us into our prefrontal cortex because we're forcing that part of the brain to function. And all of a sudden people start seeing, oh, wait, I haven't binged in like 2 weeks. I haven't binged in 2 months. What else went well? Oh, all day I was making really great food choices and I have a house full of food that I can go back to. And I reached out here for support. There is always something that went well. And so it is very, very, very important to spend a lot of time forcing yourselves to find those things. So anybody listening, if you had a learning moment, answer those questions right away. How does it make sense and what went well? Right. And try to challenge yourself to find 10 things that went well. Super
I love
important.
that because the brain will automatically find everything that's wrong, everything that you feel bad about. And, there's a place for reflecting on that. And that's what we'll get to next. But it is very important to redirect your energy onto what you are doing right.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the second step is what didn't go well. And here it's really, really important to keep it super neutral, just the facts. Right? I ate X food in X amount during this time, period, the end. Or I didn't eat lunch, so I got too hungry, and then I ate X food in X amount standing at my counter. Or I noticed that I was very stressed and I hadn't eaten enough that day. And instead of tending to my energy and getting some nutritious food, I just said, I have to push through until the urge got the better of me because I was too hungry. It's really important, but very neutrally, right? No judgmental language, no judging the food, just like being super factual about it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And what the example you use there of the person got too hungry, I think that a lot of times is in that what didn't go well place here, because a lot of times binging is a result of not eating enough, not eating adequately. So it's so, so important to see that if you're not eating enough, not feeding yourself well, then your binging is going to increase. So that's really important.
Yeah, we can't do one without the other. It's so important. Yeah. And again, another example of what didn't go well that can sometimes happen for people is I was in a social situation and I was talking and I felt kind of awkward. And then I started shoveling food in my mouth, right? And so here, what didn't go well, right? Like I didn't remember that I get nervous in social situations and I didn't take time to check in with myself. It's really important to parse things out. Or I went back to my family's house and that's a place where I used to binge and I felt kind of brought back into that world. And I was kind of surprised that I was having urges because I haven't had them in a while. I mean, these are really common things that come up. And so these learning moments are great because then you can say, oh, now I know. That gets to number 3, like, what will I do differently? So you figured out, oh, every time I go to my parents' house, this is a pattern that comes up. So I'm going to expect that to happen. I'm going to make sure I'm really well nourished. Maybe I'm going to If I'm in the group, I'm going to bookend the event, or I'm going to reach out to a friend and say, hey, I'm going to my parents' house. I need some extra support at this time. I'm going to build in walks or ways of connecting with myself, whatever it is. But you can't figure out what you'll do differently without knowing what you're already doing well and what little thing happened that, threw you off.
Yeah. And what will I do differently? A lot of times it's just increasing awareness of your patterns, of when these urges are showing up. And you learn that from seeing what didn't go well, the situations where maybe you didn't have the awareness. That was really big for me. It was the binges that we talked about in the beginning of this podcast. I didn't have the awareness. I just believed my lower brain. I let these thoughts lead me into action. And it was really that awareness piece that was so important to say, oh, no, that's not really me. That's not really expressing my true wants or needs.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to talk again about like the energy around having a learning moment, right? Because a lot of times what I hear is, I'm off the wagon. I've blown it. I've lost the plot. I've gone off track. I'm in the ditch. I'm in a spiral. I'm out of control. All of that language. It's like there is no track, wagon, train, ditch, bus, none of that. There's none of that. There's just food, choices, results. That's it. Really, really neutral. Because if you eat some extra food and then say, oh my God, I've blown it. And I'm not making fun because I've done it a million times myself. Like I know this so well, and you're probably smiling too because you've probably had those thoughts, right? We all have. But the thing is that how you talk about your eating choices creates a lot of energy, right? So if it's just, oops, I had a learning moment. Let me figure that out with curiosity and love versus, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I've blown it, right? The energy is completely different and will lead to a completely different outcome.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I've been there too, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm out of control. Like there can be so much self-criticism involved. One thing I will say though, which I'd love to hear your opinion on as well, is that I think there is a place for acknowledging the negative effects that the binge gave you. And that's something I do teach people a lot in my coaching as well, that yes, you want to stay neutral, but also to feel what you feel and realize, hey, this actually was not what I wanted. You don't have to criticize yourself. You don't have to say you're off track. You don't have to say everything is wrong, but you have to say, hey, this did not give me the result that I wanted. This is not truly what I want for my life. And the way I feel is a complete indicator of that. And that can really point you back to what you truly want, which is to make those changes, to make those corrections, and to learn from the binge.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when I say keep it neutral, I mean, look at, okay, I ate this food in this amount at this time, and you can tie into it and got these results. Absolutely. I'm depressed. I have low energy. I'm bloated. I had to miss work, whatever it is, like you can add all of those things in. Absolutely. Just not with adding in all the recrimination or this desire to punish yourself or restrict to compensate or try to clean it up in some way that's going to then lead you back into the cycle. So that's the difference. And again, also not thinking it's curtains for me, I'm completely hopeless. Yeah. So I think there's a difference between, again, neutrally seeing like, because I did this, I'm having these symptoms. Right? Like that can be very neutral. Also, almost like in a medical sense, like if you have allergies, oh, I have a peanut allergy and this food must have had peanuts in it because I'm having trouble breathing or I broke out in hives. Same thing. I ate this much food in this amount and I'm having these results from it.
Yeah, I love that, to acknowledge the results without beating yourself up for those results, right? Like it's just a cause and effect. You did this, so this happened.
That's right. Because we're always in charge. Like we always get to choose, and we're also always choosing the results along with it. That's the thing. You can't choose binging without the results of binging. You can keep binging for the rest of your life if you want to. That's a choice that people can make. There are no binge police, and you're choosing the results of those choices. And as we've said so many times, binging always and only makes everything worse. Always.
Yeah, I've had people tell me, well, if I could binge without consequences, I would keep doing it. I'm like, but that's not an option. You can never binge without the consequences. And we have to face that. There are some things in life we just can't do without the negative effects that come after.
No question. Moreover, those same people, once they've been binge free for a while, would not say that again. That's the thing. Like in the beginning, you think, I wish I could keep binging. There is that loss. There is that grief over it. Your dopamine receptors aren't level. You're still craving the addictive pattern of binging and whatever quote unquote high you get from it at first. But you can't do that without all of the negative results. And then over time, with consistency, you're not craving binging anymore. You're craving how great you feel.
Yeah. I mean, if someone told us today you could go back to binging without consequences, we wouldn't choose to do that. It's the opposite of pleasure.
Right. Exactly. So true. So I also wanted to say, like, in addition to asking those questions, right? So like you have a learning moment, please ask yourself those questions in that order, right? They're really in that order for a reason. And then also it's really, really important that when you have a learning moment, as quickly as possible, get right back to adequate eating. Like at your next meal, just have your normal adequate meal as if nothing happened, because that's going to actually reset everything in your body. And it's going to tell your brain that there's no restriction happening anymore, that you're not going to beat yourself up. It's very calming to the nervous system to just go right back to how you normally eat.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it keeps it simple. Like I remember before I learned the brain-based concepts that I wrote about, after I binged, it became very complicated. Like I needed to solve some stressor. I needed to solve some emotion. I needed to fix something in my life. I needed to change my circumstances. It was very, very complicated. Like, how do I get back on track? And in this approach, it's simple. You get back to eating adequately and get back to dismissing urges. And when you're in that mind state after a binge, when everything seems so much harder, keeping focus on these two goals just simplifies everything.
Exactly. I mean, that's the beauty of your approach. That's the beauty of Brain Over Binge. It's simple. You get the lesson, right back to eating adequately, expecting and allowing urges. That's it. And celebrate the fact that you did it fast.
Yeah. I want to bring up one thing that I think the lower brain does this little trick with people. Before a binge, it will say, you can just binge now and learn from it. And I think that's something that people need to be aware of. This is something to use after a binge. This is not something to kind of excuse binging because you can just learn.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is great. That is great. That is a sneaky lower brain thing, right? Like, oh, because you can treat it as a learning moment, you should binge, right? Like that's, yeah, exactly. There's never a reason to binge. And we all go into this thinking, or we want you all to go into this hoping and intending to never binge again. Right? Nobody ever needs to binge for the rest of their life. You can let that go and leave it behind you. And I wish that for everybody listening, that you never, ever binge again. May that be so. And make that your commitment and keep making that commitment to yourself. No matter what, I don't binge. That's behind me. I don't do that. That pattern no longer serves me. Great. Keep that as your intention. And then when and if you have a learning moment, you binge, you overeat, when that happens, then this is what you can do in those times.
Yeah.
And then go right back to, I never binge again.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to be aware of that, the possibility of having that thought, because
such a good point.
We talk about eating adequately and dismissing urges or allowing urges. And an urge is any thought, feeling, or physical sensation that encourages a binge. So a thought that says binge now and learn from it later, that's a thought that encourages a binge. So that you need to dismiss that. So if you have that thought, oh, that's my brain trying to trick me into binging, I'm going to dismiss that.
Yeah. And some other thoughts that might come up if you've had a binge could be, oh, I've already blown it for today, so I'll start tomorrow, right? We've talked about that so many times on the podcast. Or I blew it today, so I better wait until Monday or January 1st or not, March 1st. Yeah. It's that all of those thoughts, like there are going to be a lot of thoughts that come up, and all of those are just encouraging binging more, right? It's the best time to start is now. So midway through a chew, put the food down and start right now.
Yeah, for sure. The brain might say, oh, you'll learn even more after a couple of days of binging. Like, no, that's an urge to dismiss.
Totally. That's
great. So is there anything else surrounding learning moments that you want to share before we close?
Well, just the idea that, forward is a pace. Just keep that in mind. And I'll say it again. You're either winning or you're learning. And when you learn, you win more later. So again, don't seek out learning moments because they're going to happen. Like, don't seek it out. But when learning moments happen, I hope you feel like you have a lot of tools now to use so that you can seek the lesson and then you just keep moving forward.
Yeah. And I kind of had a final thought as you were saying that this is for binging, of course, but it's also for, like we did mention, for other forms of eating that you don't think are perfect. And I think treating those forms of eating as learning moments really keeps you from tipping into that oh my gosh, I've failed. I can't do this. I might as well binge.
That's right. Absolutely. Because again, there is no perfect eating. And as you're finding your formula, there are going to be learning moments, and they don't have to be in terms of like quantity. It might just be, oh, I'm learning that, that food, I don't digest it well, or I don't really like the way that tastes, or because you can have a meal that is less than your ideal and then think, well, I wasn't really satisfied. I might as well binge, like those kinds of things come up also. So learning moments could be about type of food or satiety with food or, interest in the food. All of those things are opportunities.
Yeah, and just keeping it neutral, taking the lesson, and like you said, keep moving forward.
Yeah, totally.
Well, thank you so much, Julie, for having this discussion about learning moments with me. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. And I just want to remind everybody that if you're listening to this in real time, this Saturday, the 24th, I'm doing a free call at 2:00. For anybody who wants some coaching or who wants to talk about learning moments, please come.
Yes, for sure. It will be very valuable and supportive. You can ask your questions, you can learn about coaching, and I will include a Zoom link to join that call in the show description. You can also find links to all of the other Brain Over Binge resources in the show description, including my books, the online course, and one-on-one coaching and group coaching. We hope that you've gained useful insights from today's episode and that you'll tune in again next time. Remember to subscribe to the podcast on the platform of your choice so that you can be notified of new episodes. Thank you again for being here. I know that you can absolutely make progress and break free from the struggle with food. And as always, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.